As we're going through, if you have any questions, please ask. If you don't have space on your quiz to fix anything, I do have extra blank quizzes. If anyone wants that, just let me know. And then make sure you are fixing anything that you got wrong. Alright, for number 1, you needed to figure out which of these were direct variation. That was this one, and this one. The total was out of 6 points for getting the correct ones and not getting the wrong ones. Questions on number 1? Number 2, you needed to find K and find the direct variation equation. So we know our K is y over x. So we should be dividing these two. K would have equaled 15. And then once you get that 15, your equation should be y equals 15x. So looking for this work, this answer, and this equation. Questions on number 2? Number 3, you needed to find, you could have done this one of 2 ways. So with this one, I'll do this one way, I'll do the next one a different way. If you need to see the other way, just let me know. So this one I'll just do by cross multiplying or setting up our proportions. So A varies directly with B, that would be like our y and our x. So this would be -7 over -3 is going to equal A is 14 and B we're looking for B. So you can set it up this way, cross multiply and find B. So I think this was -7B and -42. Divide both sides by -7, and you get 6. So if you did it this way, this was 3 points. If you did it the other way, it was 4 points. Anyone need to see it done the other way? Okay. Let's see if I can move some of this. For the other one, you would need to find the value of K first. So in this case, K would equal -7 over -3, or just 7/3. With that fraction, you either need to leave it as that fraction because you'll have repeating decimals, or use all of your decimals. Because if you don't use all of your decimals, your answer becomes a decimal or a rounded something, and that's not what we want. Okay, so we found K. Now we can put this back into our equation. It's going to be A equals KB. So with our numbers, we have 14 equals 7/3 B. You would either need to divide by 7/3 or multiply by the reciprocal, 3 over 7. If you did that, either way you did that, you should get 6 still as the final answer. So this one was only 4 because, what was this one for? I don't remember.
Actually finding your K value. Questions on that?
For number 4, again, you could have set it up either way. This way, I'll start with finding K. If it gives you variables, use those variables. So for this one, it used G and M. So in this case, you need your equation, G equals Km. If we're finding K, that's going to be G over M. So we would need 9 over 200. For this one, if you put this into your calculator, you got a decimal that stops. So you could have used the decimal as 0.045, or you could have left it as this fraction. And then use that K value in your equation with the other numbers. So here we're looking for gallons. So it's going to be G equals our K times 315. It did not say to round, so if you put all the decimals, if you put some of them, if you rounded, that was fine. The only thing that was not is because it was 14.175, if you just put 14.1, that wouldn't be right. If you're going to use one decimal, round. $14.2, 14.17, 14.18, any of those would have been fine. And make sure you include your units, gallons. So this one had a point for setting up your equation, for finding your K value, for putting your K in and finding G, and then your final answer, if you did it that way. Questions on number 4? And then the last one, you can either set it up like this or go back to the proportions. So I'll solve this one by proportions. Here, this one doesn't have variables, so you need to tell me what your variables are. It can be X and Y, it can be I and D, whatever you want. So I think I called this I for interest, and the amount deposited was B. So that would be 1 point. And then setting this up, 61.50 over 1,500. So interest over deposited. And then you need your interest again, and that would be what we're looking for, over your 2,000. Then you could cross multiply, and you get 1,500I equals, it was a really big number, 123,000. And then you could divide both sides by 1,500. And I should have been $82. Do we have any questions on number 5? So if you did it this method, this would have been 4 points. If you did it the method of finding K, that would have been 6 points. Sorry. Because if you find K, you have to include your equation.
Do we have any questions in general on direct variation?
Moving to inverse. If you need to go back to any, let me know. Same thing, we needed to find which of these were inverse. Remember that your inverse looks like, so if you're not sure which of these are that, you have a calculator. Put these into your calculator, see which ones do this. For this one, that was this one, and this one. This one is in the format k equals y times x or x times y. So that automatically, without solving it, you could figure that out. With solving it, you would also see it's in the same format as the one below it. This one is in the same format, it just has more numbers. But if you put this in, it still does this. That would still be an inverse. For number 7, you need to find the inverse equation. So this is very much like the first one on the direct. To find our k value, we need to multiply these two. So we know our k value would be 10. And then once you get that 10, your equation needs to be y equals 10 over x.
So again, I needed to see how you found k, your value for k, and your equation. Do we have any questions for number 7? This one was probably the most problematic one I saw because of the x value being a fraction.
I think the easiest way is if you set it up as an equation. Remember that these are not proportions, but equations. So if I set it up as an equation, that would be x times y, so 1/7 times 13 equals, we're looking for x, and y is 9.1. So we have 13/7 equals 9.1x. And then you could divide this fraction by 9.1. If you were doing that in your calculator, I would make the 13/7 a fraction, and then just divide it by 9.1. So not that, but it's close to it. And then 0.2, 0.204, any of those would work.
Anyone want to see this done the other way? So I would say if you get one like this, set them up as equations because it's less fraction within fraction you have to deal with. But it could be done the other way as well. For number 9, 9 is very similar to 7, where you have to find your value of k and find your equation. So instead of it giving you y equals x equals, it gives you the point. So you need to know that this is x, y. So this would be k equals 2 times 4, which is 8. And then your equation would be y equals 8 over x. Questions on 9?
For 10, we're going to do the extended way. So for this, you would need to have your equation This is an inverse. At the top of this page and the direct, it has your equations, so it should be in this format, but if it gives you variables, use those. So this would be V equals K over P. And then here we would need to find our value of K by taking 27 and 13 and multiplying those together. K becomes 351. And then you can take that 351 and put it back into your equation. We're looking for the volume. We know our K is 351, and we know our pressure is now 9. So if we divide that, we get 39. And since we're looking for volume, you have to find the unit volume used, which was cubic feet. For these two, no matter which way you solved it, you need to set up your original equation for these. Do you have any questions on 10? For 11, I'm going to solve using our equation. Here we don't have variables, so we need to define them. You can call them N and R and something else, X and Y, doesn't matter. So our equation here would be N equals K over R. But I'm setting this up using my equation. So I would have my first two numbers, 12 times 100 equals, I'm looking for revolutions, that's my N, times 15. And I would multiply those together and solve for N. I think this was easy. Yeah. Anyone have questions on that one?
Why do I get half the time?
I'll look at that. Okay. Anyone need to see any of these done the other way? Do we have any questions in general about inverse variation? On to objective 3. So for these 12 through 15, these should have just been you setting up these equations. Remember, jointly and directly, you're both multiplying. Inversely, you're dividing. So for 12, y we're jointly as n and n should be y equals. Don't forget your k value, because many of you were doing that. Your k needs to be in all of these equations. If you don't have a constant, these don't really work. 13, we had inversely as b, so a equals k over b, and directly as c. So the c could be next to it, or it could be in the numerator. Either of those would work. What would not work is if you put c in the denominator. W varies inversely as the square root of v. Make sure you're reading these words, because I think many of you read this and thought this one was the same, but they're not. So this would be k over the square root of v.
And 15, m varies jointly as m and n, so that would be m equals k and o, and inversely as p. So dividing by p. Questions on any of those before we move on? So for all of these, you first need to set up your equation. C varies jointly as A and T. C equals KAT. And then we can put in our numbers to find K, and then use K to find our missing. So 20 equals K times 1 times 5, or 20 equals 5K. Divide both sides by 5. So K equals 4. Put your K value back in with your other numbers. So you have, we're looking for T, 16 equals 4 times, whatever A is, 2 times T. Or 16 equals 18, divide both sides by 8. And our final answer would have been 2 equals T. So this was worth 5 points, 1 for setting up the equation, 1 for the work to find K, 1 for your K, whatever value you get, 1 for the work to find T, and then 1 for whatever your value of T was. Do we have any questions on 16? For 17, A varies inversely as B and directly as C. This is, if not the same, it's similar to 13. So A varies inversely as B and directly as C. Put the C next to it or in the numerator. And then we have A equals 1/2. We don't know our K. We know our C is 2. We know our B is 56. From here, there are a lot of different ways you could, not a lot, but there are different ways you could start this. You could get rid of 56 by multiplying it to both sides. You could simplify 2 and 56 and then deal with that number. Either of those approaches is fine. I don't know what I did. I think I multiplied it. I think that was 28. No, that doesn't seem right. Oh yeah. So the 1/2 times 56 gives you 28, and then you're left with 2K. Divide both sides by 2, and you get 14. And then use that 14 to find your value of B. So we have 14 equals 14 times our value of C, which was 1, and we're looking for B. So we know this is 14 equals 14 over B. I could multiply both sides by B to get it out of the denominator. And then divide both sides by 14. So that one was actually 6 points, making sure that you set it up correctly, having the inversely and the directly. And then everything else is the same. Questions on that one?
for 18, we had B varies inversely with the square of B, so that should have been B squared, not the square root. And then we can put in our values and find K. So 2 equals K over 5 squared would be 25. So you could put in 5 and then square it, or if you know that's 25, you could just change it to 25. So we would multiply both sides by 25 to get K equals 50. And then use that to find B. So from here, you would need to multiply both sides by B squared. Get it out of the denominator. Divide both sides by 4. I think that was 12.5. Then the very last thing you need to do is get rid of the square. So undo it by taking the square root of both sides. And when you take the square root of 12.5, you get 3.535, and I think there was some other numbers. Have any questions on 18? And then the very last one. Here we have the cost C varies jointly with the width and the length. You can call that W and L, X and Y, it does not matter. So that would have been your equation. Then putting in your values to find K, we have the debt cost 12,000. We don't know K, but we know the width is 12 and the length is 20. Multiply 12 and 20. I think that's what that was. And divide. So that K equals 5. And then once you have that K value, put that back in to your equation with the other numbers. So now we're looking for costs. And we know K is 5, our width is 10, and our length is 10. So if we multiply that all together, we get 500. And our units here was costs, so we need dollars. Do we have any questions on that one? If you had specific questions on why I got this wrong or points taken off, I'll be around and you can ask that individually. I would use this time to either look back at your quiz, make sure that you fully understand why you got anything wrong, fix it, make sure you fix it, go back to the review, keep working through those problems, go back to the practice, redo those, and use this time wisely. Yeah.